I would like to open the meeting, and there's a number of protocols that have to be done. Jewel, our board secretary, will read the first statement.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open the meeting and explain the rules for the electronic meeting. Please keep your microphone on mute while you're not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if the microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure the microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me at 540-336-3948 at any time during the meeting if you need technical support, and an IT tech will call your cell phone to assist. I now turn the meeting over to Committee Chairman Bonfils. Thank you.
Good morning, and I'd like to welcome everybody. I appreciate starting this meeting early this morning. It's a good meeting. It's good morning. We already had one meeting in the audit committee, so we're off and running. There's a chairman's statement I must read. In accordance with the governor's statement of state of emergency declaration, the executive orders regarding COVID-19 pandemic, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Continuity Ordinance, General Assembly 2020 Budget Amendment 28 and 137, Loudoun Water will meet today in an electronic meeting in compliance with these special procedures. Only action items necessary for the continued operation of Loudoun Water and the discharge of its lawful purpose, duties, responsibilities will be discussed during today's meeting. Reports and other meeting information are available on board docs. Public notice of the meeting access information was provided to the Loudoun Water website. A recording of the meeting will be available at this link, loudonwater.org, virtual meeting recordings. Board members wishing to speak are reminded to press unmute, that's for me, and identify themselves so that staff can accurately capture their comments. All items will be recommended to the March 11th, 2021 board meeting. Thank you very much.
I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Bonfils?
Here.
Mr. Allen?
Here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Sultan?
Here.
I'd also like to acknowledge that Chairman Koblis and Jonathan Rock are on the call.
Well, thank you very much for the roll call, and thank you for the attendance. I note that Executive Director Paul Gilbert is also on the call. Thank him for attending. We'll wave at him. So let's go ahead and discuss the agenda. The agenda was sent out in advance. I intend to make no changes to the agenda. Could I have a motion to accept the agenda?
This is Brett. I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second, Marty.
Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Bonfils. Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
And Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Thank you.
And yes for me. So, all right, let's start with the action items. There are none. So we will move into informational items. And I'd like to recognize Sue Crosby, and we're anxious to hear your presentation.
Okay, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just make sure I've got control here. Okay, great. Well, thank you and good morning, and I'm glad to be here to discuss our education and outreach update, which also will include some interpretive plans for Reservoir Park. I know that you said that Paul Gilbert is here, but Dale Hamas is here as well, so I just wanted to recognize Dale. As you know, we have a robust outreach and education program to educate, inform, and engage our customers, stakeholders, elected officials, and the public about the value and importance of water. Increased public awareness and access promotes safe interaction with water resources, encourages protection and conservation efforts, and builds awareness of Loudoun water services. In a normal year, We serve over 7,000 visitors through our apiary exhibit and outdoor trails, school visits, scouting events, and other HOA events. And my slide, oops, there we go. So obviously COVID protocols and school closures have definitely impacted our program, but like everyone else, we pivoted and we embraced the virtual environment. And as you can see here on this slide, we've used our studio, which you can see there on the left, and we've demonstrated our watershed model for several groups this past year. And I just wanted to recognize Erica Cuevas, who's our outreach coordinator, and she's done just a phenomenal job of keeping student groups and others engaged in our program. So we've done water education presentations for Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, civic groups. We've done water education presentations for LCPS, for the elementary school and middle school class levels. And topics have ranged from careers in water, source water protection, watersheds, and treatment processes. The watershed model and water protection lessons directly align with the Virginia Standards of Learning, which is also why the teachers find our program so valuable. And for those who weren't able to enjoy some of those virtual lessons, we also encouraged some self-guided walking tours of our outdoor apiary trail, and we provided scavenger hunts to those people who visit us outside. Another event we participated in this year was the Global Inheritance Leading Ladies Initiative. And I think you may have heard about this before, but this is an internship program that provided high school participants with a STEM internship opportunity during a 2-week development program to prepare them for college and the STEM-based workforce. And obviously this, again, was supposed to be an on-site in-person program, but it was also delivered virtually. And then as part of the program, we hosted a leadership development day for the entire cohort of student participants. And this included interactive presentations with Loudon Water staff. So you can see some of our staff and the students there on the Brady Bunch screen. So as we continue to work through the limitations of COVID, we still have several events upcoming that we're participating in. One is the Children's Science Center Earth Day collaboration in April. We're participating in the Loudon Environmental Education Alliance second annual Student Environmental Showcase in April. And then we have water education presentations for high school students participating in the Soil Water Conservation District, Loudon County Public Schools Envirothon this spring. And this year's topic is water. So as you can see, a lot of effort goes into planning and hosting these educational events. So Beaver Dam Reservoir Park is really another educational destination that we can add to our portfolio and build on all the progress and relationships we've made over the past years. And these are our goals with Reservoir Park. You've seen this before, but we want to amplify the natural attributes of the site, showcase Loudon Water's mission and balance that with recreation, instill a sense of stewardship in all visitors and an appreciation for Loudon Water service, and align the learning opportunities there with LCPS programs, scouting badges, and other environmental groups. So here's an overview of our approach and narrative concept. And it's a nice, concise way to look at this really unique opportunity that we have with our partnership with Nova Parks. Loudon Water's educational focus is obviously water quality and water security, which we'll highlight here on this water axis. And then Nova Parks' focus is recreation, and that's highlighted here on the arc. And then on this side, you can see where the crew facilities and boat rental areas will be definitely focusing more on the recreational aspect. And then over here where the bridge will be, we'll have more of an opportunity for some ecological experiences. Oops. So here on the water axis, visitors will be presented with interpretive content that will focus on highlighting moments of the engineered and natural water cycles that will occur in and around Beaver Dam Reservoir Park. And the interpretive narrative will begin at the Welcome Center and follows this central spine through the woods to the waterfront. And along the way, visitors are engaged into a series of educational interpretive moments that detail or highlight the water cycle and everyone's part in it. And we're focusing on these verbs that kind of have helped us shape the story as we've gone along. And those are over here: direct, capture, filter, absorb, channel, slow, control, and protect. And you'll see these verbs in installations throughout the park. So what follows next is I'm going to show you some examples of what we envision being installed at the park. This is just an example of an interpretive rail that you might see at different locations, perhaps on the boardwalk overlooking the water. And the language and the graphics for these haven't been finalized yet, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what they might look like. This is another interesting way to engage visitors at the park. These are cast bronze medallions, and each of the medallions will represent one of those verbs that we discussed earlier. And they'll be in different locations in the park. We envision something like this on the signage in appropriate areas. And then it's kind of a fun way where students and visitors could take a paper and etch over the medallion and create a type of a scavenger hunt. This is just an example of an embedded interpretive rail, which would have digitally imprinted text, messages, and graphics that will be installed flush with some of the decking at appropriate locations. And again, the language and stories for these haven't been finalized yet, but I wanted to show you what they would look like. This is the relief map. I think we've mentioned it before. This will be a pretty large feature that we envision that visitors will see right as they pass through the Welcome Center. And what we're thinking for this is either a graphic of the watershed to highlight Loudon Water System, or perhaps showing the reservoir, the quarries, Goose Creek, and the Potomac. And these are kind of cool. These are fun water activated installations that you can use for graphics or text. And we would envision these near either a water bottle filling station or the area where users would clean off their boats. And these are interesting because you can change the language and those graphics. They last for about 8 to 12 weeks. So we could envision this as part of, a scouting event, Earth Day, or things of that nature. And we can come up with the stories and the graphics for those. This is just a water level indicator that would be embedded in the concrete near the boat launch. We had a funny conversation a few weeks ago that maybe we would make t-shirts that say 289.3 so visitors could get a souvenir from Beaver Dam. These are fun magnification stations that would be located in a couple of different locations throughout the park. And we just envision this for kids who are looking at birds or rocks or leaves or that sort of thing. This is a manual playground pump that would draw water from the reservoir into a long rail that runs parallel to the pier. This is a wildlife blind, so users could kind of go behind this and view birds and other kind of cool things you might see at Beaver Dam. And this is a viewfinder that we envision near the crew area, so people could take a look at the boats and the crew, the teams out there. And these are just some more examples of what some of the signs might look like. And again, these are not finalized at all, just some ideas that we've come up with. And finally, this is just an overview of the park. You've seen this before, but I wanted to give you a sense of where some of our installations might be. So I won't get into too much detail, but you can see where these kind of circles are highlights the placemaking, wayfinding, and interpretive exhibits that we just discussed. And that's all I had, so I'm happy to take some questions.
Mr. Koblis has a question.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Sue, thanks.
Sure.
Just amazing things that you're doing. Kudos to whoever came up with the ideas of the medallions and things like that. That's just awesome. Wish I was a kid. My question is will there be a way to donate towards this, you know, from outside, or do we have to bring it all from inside? Will we put out something that people can donate money to even add more or whatever?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I know we have lots of people interested in the park. As a matter of fact, we have a Girl Scout group who has offered to make some signs for us about water safety. So there's a lot of interest, and that's a great suggestion. And I'm sure we could, you know, work with Paul and his group at Nova Parks and maybe come up with some ideas for some crowdsourcing or crowdfunding or things like that. But thank you for that suggestion. I think that's something we should take back.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure it's, you know, not time, but dollars to donate. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? I do have one, Sue. I noticed on the plaques, and I know they're not final. Everybody seems to get used to using the QR codes at restaurants to get the menu, but that could also be used as a way to drive folks to our website, putting a QR code on the displays if they want more information.
Absolutely. There's a lot of synergies between our website, our indoor apiary, and Reservoir Park. And obviously with kind of our environmental focus, we don't want people to have a ton of paper. So a QR code would be great for maps or scavenger hunts or things like that. So those types of things are definitely on our radar.
It's great to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Sultan has a question.
Not a question, just a comment. I think what you're doing, the ideas you've come up with are absolutely outstanding.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very excited about it. We have a really good team that's been working together on this. So thanks.
Mr. Allen?
Yeah, I want to echo everyone else's comments. This list looks really good. I have a couple really brief questions. The butterfly roof, are we going to have some sort of plaque or written description about the uniqueness of the butterfly roof? I saw there's a water trail, but will that be part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely have some type of interpretive signage or explanation for why the roof is shaped that way. And again, we haven't finalized that, but we certainly will have something there.
Okay. And then a follow-up question would be, you know, when you go to museums, they have headsets you can put on. I know that's helpful for elderly people who can't read that well or can't see, and it kind of guides them around. I don't know whether this is the type of venue for that, but have we considered that option for people?
We haven't, but again, that's something, everyone has an iPhone, so it's something that we could develop, you know, perhaps a pre-recorded, map through Reservoir Park, or some kind of app that we could use as well. And I'm sure we'll work with Nova Parks. They probably have great ideas for things like this too. So that's a great suggestion.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Sue. That was a great presentation.
Sure.
Very
Thanks.
good. So, Stefan, are you ready for the update on Reservoir Park? Oh, you are. Let's go.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Let me just request for control. Great. So this presentation is mainly focusing on talking about the updated cost estimate for the Reservoir Park project. I would like to mention that we also have Nelson Bergwolz on the line as well.
Who's on the call from Nelson Birdwall?
We have John Ridenauer, who's the PM, and then also Evan.
Okay.
So before I jump into the cost estimate, we have, I just want to present the updated schedule. As you can see right now, we just finished up with the 50% construction documents. That probably relates close to 85 or 90% design, and just completed the cost estimate. We received that last week, so it's still in its draft form. Over the next couple of months, we're going to be working through the finalized design, and should have something final by early summer or so. And we'll also be getting one last final cost estimate completed after those documents are ready. Looking from the permitting side of things, we're looking to submit our second submission of the site plan to Loudoun County very shortly. So we're going through that process. We'll likely need one more resubmission after this. And we're also going to be starting some of the other permits within the next month or two, which brings us to bidding the project out in the summer, and then hopefully working through the award process later this year. And I believe we'll probably be starting or issuing NTP for construction, I'd imagine late this year, early next year. So just looking at the cost estimate overview, as I mentioned, we received this last week, so this is a draft cost estimate. We still need to have one more conversation with our estimator just to confirm some things, and we have some comments on it. But we figure this was a good thing to present, and while numbers might change a little bit, I don't think we're moving the needle too much. The estimate is based off these 50% construction documents, which we received a couple weeks ago, and it came in just over $9.7 million. So I showed this table here. It's a comparison of the previous cost estimate, which was presented a couple months ago, and this current cost estimate, and the difference is about $85,000. So on this next slide, I have a bit of a breakdown, just trying to show some of the major sort of line items of the park and their associated costs. I guess one thing to note, on this current cost estimate, we had our estimator break out these the costs into each of these line items. On the previous estimate, it wasn't broken down that way. So I went through and did the best I can to break out the associated costs and assign them to each line item. They might not be perfect, but I think it's close enough to be dangerous. So we can draw relative comparisons to each line item. And just one other thing to mention is that the line items do include the indirect costs. Just keep that in mind. So, I mean, I'm not sure if you'd like me to go through each of these, but you can see some of the major changes, or not major, but some of the larger changes between the pricing. Mr. Koblis, you have a question? I believe you're muted still.
I know, I almost made another rookie mistake. Well, I'm looking at your cost estimate breakdown, and I see on the estimate that you sent me, I guess, do these numbers have the general conditions and
yes,
et cetera added into them?
Yeah, so they have, I think it's probably 27% added on top of the direct cost you'll see broken out.
Okay, got it. What is the crew building? Remind me again. Is this where the boats are?
That's where the crew
stored?
shells will be stored, and there's also some areas where them to get changed. But yeah, a large portion of that area is just the shell storage, and then the associated concrete pad and crew decks.
So I guess I was just, well, are you going to get down into the more costs, or is this as I didn't really look at the presentation, but are you going to go into some more? I have some questions on costs. Number one, site work just seems astronomical. That's where all our money's going, just about. So I'm wondering, is there anything we can do now that we have this cost estimate to reduce cost?
So I guess to answer your first question, so this is about as broken down as it gets in this presentation. Okay. As for site work, I included quite a few items in there. So that includes earthwork, includes the water, sewer, electrical, and storm. And then it also includes plantings and exterior improvements, which are like all the parking lot, pavement, all that. So it is a large portion of the cost, but I think it does encompass quite a bit of work.
Well, just looking at the cost estimate, I mean, my experience, and I did check these numbers with a few of my associates in this type of business. General conditions seems extremely high for this type of project. The profit seems extremely high for this type of project. So I'm just wondering whether these are conservative numbers, but I can tell you that the people that are going to bid on this project aren't going to charge this much. So I just want to make sure we don't have a overly conservative cost estimate. So like we did on a previous project. And then all of a sudden it comes in $1 million to $2 million less than this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and that's a great point. Something, you know, we're having a call later this week with our estimator. I'd like to clarify that with him and see if these numbers are based off of, you know, his experience in this area or where he's getting those numbers from. But
yeah, I mean, we're used to projects that are, you know, really technical. This is not a technical project, so to have general conditions at 8.5% is ludicrous. And profit of 5%, it's just a lot of money that I think is, and I'm just guessing that the estimator is just throwing this in here for now, and I just want to make sure that we don't get everybody all concerned about this cost estimate, and then when the real costs come in, they're $1 million less than this.
Okay, yeah, that's absolutely something we'll discuss with our estimator. And I guess on that note, there's one other item I'd like to bring to the attention of the committee members. You know, in these indirect costs, we also have a 5% design contingency, which equates to about $430,000. You know, as we go through the design and it progresses, that number's come down, or that's a percentage of the overall cost. So, you know, with our next design submission, we'll be fully complete and will likely be a good way through the permitting process. So that contingency number we're carrying over should be zero or very close to it. So that's about $430,000, I believe, that we're carrying over. But Ms. Kobus, I think those are good recommendations and good things to think about. We'll definitely bring that up to our estimator and see if he has more. He can expand on that. Mr. Campbell.
Yes, hey, thanks, Stefan. I see we've got roughly 650,000 in there for paving. How much of that is just for the parking lot? I don't remember. What is it, like 200 some parking spaces? Where have we ended up on that?
I think that's about 215 parking spaces or so.
Okay.
So I'm looking right now for paving. About,
kind of got broken into 3 sections there.
Yeah, I mean, I see the paving asphalt base is 260,000. The stone base is 260,000. I think I have to go through, if you want just a specific parking lot number, I'd have to go through a little more and break out individually.
Sure, that's fine. But is it fair? What like 2/3 of that's probably for the parking lot and 1/3?
I imagine a large portion of that's for a parking lot.
Yeah,
and we always have entry road as well, but.
And are we just using it looks like we're just using conventional base and asphalt for the parking lot. We're not doing anything unusual there?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And then I also noticed we've got 14 bike racks at a cost of $1,700. Is that correct? Is that all we're doing, 14? Is that a typo?
That's what we're showing now. And we've set aside space on the plans to expand that. With this number, we're sort of leaning on Nova Parks to help us sort of dictate exactly how many to install. We've had this conversation with them in the past, and they think this is a decent starting point. They said it's very easy for them to add bike parking, especially since we have the space allocated. Be happy to circle them once more just to get a final confirmation. And if we do need to add some, I think we already have the space, or we do have the space sort of set aside for those extra parking racks.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're correct. We have talked about this in the past. And so part of my frustration is that number doesn't change month after month as we go over this. But, I'd remind everyone, this is in the bike shed for the Ashburn Metro. We spent a lot of money to bring Metro to Loudoun County. And, when we talk about water quality, parking lots and cars are one of the chief contaminants of water, as we all know. biking is far more efficient. We have many thousands of homes within easy biking distance of this park, and it's baffling to me why we continue to work with 14 bike racks, and it's certainly not a cost issue. This is a negligible cost, and I don't understand it, frankly.
Hey, Stefan, this is Evan from Nelson Bird Wolf. It might be helpful if I clarify that there's actually 18 bike racks. Each one has parking for 2 bikes, so we're 36 bikes, and that was doubled per comments we received last time. So we originally had 9. We doubled it per our last call, so we're at 36 bikes currently, and with room to expand from there. So
Okay.
Just a little bit of clarification.
And I appreciate that. Thank you, Evan. From my perspective, this should be equal or greater than the number of parking spots that we're providing for automobiles. We want to encourage people to bike, not discourage them. And there's no reason this shouldn't be 100, 200 bike spots here. I've got pictures, by the way, from like Reston Town Center or some other areas where you have sort of these double bike racks, but they don't necessarily. I'd be curious in seeing where, and maybe we haven't landed on a particular rack, but some of them are not conducive to, even though you can do it, it's possible, they're not conducive to putting 2 bikes together. The handlebars bang against each other and so forth. So I appreciate what you're saying, Evan. I'd like to see that design. I know we had looked at some pictures some months ago. I don't remember the designs that you guys have. I think, matter of fact, I think didn't I send you Washington D.C.'s bike? I don't know. They had a thing they had put together on bikes and best practices for bike racks and all of that. Did I send that to you?
That's right. You did.
Okay, no, but that was, I don't even remember exactly what that entailed. That was probably like 6 months ago or something, but I know they had done some work on that as well. So are we looking at like the loops that go into the ground? Is that what you're anticipating?
It's kind of a modified loop. It's they're meant to go side by side so that you're not, the bikes are farther apart from each other than just the width of the tube steel itself.
Okay.
Because you're right. When you put them that close, and the handlebars get all kind of tangled up and all that. So these are kind of we can share the what we've currently got spec'd with you. There, it's not just a simple upside down U. It's kind of a little bit bigger than that, so it spaces the bikes out. So,
Okay.
But we do have room for expansion here. Part of the challenge with us, or not with us, but with bike racks in general, is we've done, for example, work at UVA where we put a certain amount of bike racks in, and in some cases they're not used at all. In other cases there aren't enough bike racks, and so it's a little bit like desire lines when designing a trail system. It's one of those things where we try to plan for an additional expansion, and then when we need it, we're able to kind of add on to it, so that we're not from the outset giving hundreds of square feet paved area back over that isn't initially used, but it's expandable. Is the thought.
Sure, and again, I appreciate that. But from my perspective, I've been to every park in Ashburn, and I've been to it with my kids and other families. Most of the parks in Ashburn have very, very few bike racks or bike facilities. Most parents, especially during COVID, have just been attaching their bikes to trees, with a bike lock and things like this. But Loudon has spent a lot of time looking at this area. We did a comprehensive plan that was completed last year, or actually I guess it's now 2 years ago. But we want to encourage people to bike. This area has not had a lot of biking in the past, but that was all before we signed on to Metro, and there's been a lot of money and effort put into that. And so we've established a bike shed. We want people biking, And if we're going to have people biking, you need two things. You need bike paths for people to use so they don't get run over by cars and they can feel safe. And then you need a place for them to park their bike so that they can walk around the park. And if we provide those two things, we'll have a lot of people biking, and that keeps cars off the roads. That means we have less contaminants going into the water supply. I don't understand why we wouldn't want to encourage that.
Absolutely. Yep. We're in agreement.
Thank you.
Mr. Kobus and Mr. Sultan, do you guys have your hands raised? Mr. Kobus, I think you're muted again.
Another rookie mistake.
I got it. Easy. I start talking before just a Hungarian trait, I guess. Hey, maybe is it Evan that's was the architect that was talking?
Yes.
I got a great suggestion here. Let's just add a bunch more bike racks. I mean, Brent's been bringing this up for a long time. It can't be that much more expensive. Let's just add them. Brent is going to be one of the guys voting on this thing, and this is a minor thing that we can add. So please just figure it out and add some bike places, please. Thanks.
No, and Mr. Sultan.
I have to agree with Mark, and I have to agree with Brent. I think adding a few bike racks can't be that expensive. I ride the W&OD bike trail quite often, and they don't have nearly enough bike racks. People are leaning bikes up against the trees of fences. I have to agree with Brent. I think we should add the bike racks.
Okay, I think it's loud and clear. We will work some more bike racks into the park design. If there aren't any more questions on this slide, we move forward. I just wanted to give a quick discussion of the costs when compared to the previous estimate. So a couple of items that sort of push the cost up. One of them being the bridge. We opted to obviously keep that in, but it came in a bit more expensive than we were initially thinking. So that helped elevate the cost a bit. Same with the maintenance building. We got more definition on exactly what's going into that cost, so it increased the cost. And then the last one was just, we had some delays in the last year, so there's some cost escalation numbers associated with that. On the flip side of things, looking at some items that help reduce costs, one of them being the boat rental reconfiguration. We discussed with this committee a couple months ago. We also removed the small pavilion and then also, just further refined pavilion costs. And I think that helped bring down the numbers on those items. And then one thing to note with this estimate I presented, it includes all these, or it includes sort of the full design with none of these bid alternates. We are looking to incorporate some of these 3 alternates into the bid package. So one of them would be to remove a row of paved parking and replace it with turf parking. Another one is removal of that stone water table on the restroom and welcome center buildings, and also remove the crew mezzanine that's included in the crew storage building. So those costs are all included in the estimate now, and they might be coming out depending on the overall bid cost and what these items cost. Mr. Kobus?
Crap. Got it. I tell you, I start talking before. Can you explain what the reduction on the turf parking means? You're going to add more turf parking, or you're going to take it? Can you just explain that? Thanks.
Yes. So right now we're showing several rows of asphalt parking spaces in the parking lot. The goal with this is to remove pretty much an entire row of parking spaces, and instead of paving it, replace it with turf parking. So it wouldn't be an addition to be it instead of. So
I thought this whole thing was going to be turf parking. When did asphalt make it in here?
As far as my recollection goes, this has always been asphalt parking.
I think Oh, no, I think the very first meeting we had, it was going to all be on grass block. I think that's what you mean by turf parking, right? The grass
Yeah.
block.
And I mean, there were some conversations about, you know, always having this as a bid alternate and replacing some parking with turf parking. I'm not sure if we've ever actually talked about doing the entire parking lot as a turf parking or reinforced grass parking lot.
Well, okay, that's a great alternate then. Thanks.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a good alternate.
Mr. Allen?
Yeah, thank you. I recently went to Confluence Park, which is in River Creek, and they put a dock onto the Goose, and they have a lot of people who rent kayaks there, and they have an interesting launch for kayaks. I don't know whether we're contemplating this or not. I took pictures of it, but it's basically a floating piece of plastic that's attached to the dock, and there's a bar, so you can put your kayak in a little chute, step from the dock and hold the bar and get in the kayak. And they say it's been super helpful for helping people transition from the dock and into the water. And I don't, this is kind of off topic a little bit, but I saw the boat rental reconfiguration and that made me think of it. So have you guys thinking about anything like that?
Yeah, so actually incorporating the design now is what we're calling a beach launch. And it's essentially like a slope section that goes into the water so that you don't have to launch from a dock itself. You can place your boat sort of half in the water, half on land, get into it, and then help push yourself off. I mean, it's not like a slide as you're describing, but it's very, I guess, quite similar. And this is Adam.
Terry,
Yep.
this is Evan. We do have one of those in the current plan. It's required from a ADA standpoint.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes, thanks. With the turf parking, if that's actually cheaper, is there any reason we wouldn't want to do that? Is there a concern of longevity or some other concern? Because from my perspective, it's looking like a win-win. It saves money and it's less runoff. But maybe I'm wrong. Is it not less runoff?
No, I imagine, and I'm not sure if Evan wants to jump in and expand on this.
Yeah.
But
Sure. Yeah, we've got to kind of deal with the same amount of runoff because it's really comes down to a grading issue. This would be reinforced turf, so think of it as gravel with a thin layer of topsoil and seed on top of it. It's really in the end, it's not a huge needle mover from a cost standpoint. What we're looking at is because the parking lot's designed in kind of arcs that mirror the kind of main pedestrian spine and center on the welcome center. What we proposed is keeping asphalt parking spaces and travel lanes closest to the welcome center, and then furthest away on the kind of furthest out band of parking that could potentially go to turf and essentially act as kind of overflow for kind of high use days. In our experience, all turf parking for anything that's even remotely popular doesn't last. It ends up being no turf, just gravel essentially. Or not. But
Okay. No, that's fair. That's helpful. I wasn't sure about the durability of it. So if it's not a durable alternative, then maybe parking is, asphalt is a better way to go. So thanks for clarifying that.
okay, great. And I guess all that I really had left on this presentation, unless there are further questions. I can get the slides to advance. Nope. So I just wanted to throw up this table. Again, this was presented several months ago at the Water Resources Committee, just giving an overview of the total park costs as it stands now. We have the allocated money for design, permitting, cost estimating, and then the construction costs and contingency and CA services are all estimated at this point. Bring our subtotal to a little under $12 million. And then, with no Parks' contribution, Depending on what we're valuing the easements at, it brings down our land water's contribution. Just figured it'd be helpful to throw this up once more. As far as the presentation goes, that's all I really had. I'm not sure if there's any more questions from the members.
It was a very good presentation and a lot of great discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. I appreciate it.
And there's no other questions, then we can move on to item C, the ICPRB discussion. Thanks again. It's great questions.
All right, good morning, committee members. This is the final information item for the morning. And so I'll start in a couple things. Pam Kennel and I are gonna present this item. And over the course of time, you've heard us talk a little bit about the Interstate Commission and the Potomac River Basin, or ICPRB. And, I'll start with, just as part of the intro, this is prior to the initiation of this committee. This was the type of topic that we talk a lot about in bringing about the idea of this committee, because there's a lot of participation that Loudon Water employees have, and there's a lot of regional coordination through this type of group. And there aren't action items all the time, so there isn't a lot of opportunity to bring this and really allow to get a greater understanding of some of these type of topics in this kind of group. And so this is the kind of thing where over time, while there's no action coming out of this now, there may be initiatives or issues that come up that having a little bit more background, is going to be helpful. So that's really the purpose of this. And we put together some slides here, and we may not go through all the details on the slides, but part of this is meant to kind of have a takeaway and a reference guide, and just to be able to go through this. And again, we'll really be open to any kind of discussion or questions about some of the things in here. So make sure, okay. So the ICPRB history dates back to 1940, and through the federal government, Act of Congress, what was happening at that time is there was some pretty extreme pollution happening in the Potomac River. And so there was a recognized effort to kind of pull the jurisdictions that are in the basin together and really form a compact to take on some of the needs that were coming up at that time. The membering jurisdictions you see on the screen: Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, also the District of Columbia and the federal government. And so I'll get to this, but it was really in the 1970s that a lot of change came to this. Now, before I kind of get back to that, I'll just show kind of the context, some geography here. It's a pretty large geographical area, about 15,000 square miles, and in the basin, there's just over 6 million people. And while it is a pretty expansive area, at the same time, for the number of states and jurisdictions, but also inclusive of the District of Columbia and the federal government presence, it's actually a pretty unique watershed and water source in the United States, with the presence of the federal government and Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. It really brings about a heightened importance and some complexity to it. So I'll continue on here and really get to what the ICPRB is. It is a group, and through the mission here, you see some of the key things. It's kind of a group of a lot of scientists. It does a lot of studying, technical studies on the river. It's one of the critical groups in our region that sort of pulls together a lot of lot of different types of committees and groups, and performs a role in the regional cooperation and education for the public. Last couple of years, there's been a basin-wide watershed comprehensive plan that's come out of this, and they pull together a lot of stakeholders. So lots of good value that we get out of this, lots of participation, and it's been something that, you know, we spend a fair amount of time with. So again, kind of going back through, I mentioned, you know, the beginning in 1940, but it was in the 70s that really things began to change. In 1970, Congress amended the compact to include land and water resources. And really a major milestone was in 1979. It was the initiation of the Section for Cooperative Water Supply Operations. It's the co-op section. The co-op section of the ICPRB is all of the jurisdictions. It gets complicated with it's been taking us time to kind of figure some of this out as we've participated, but the cooperative section is all of the member jurisdictions except for the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is not actually, they're in the basin, but they're not connected directly to the Potomac River. So the co-op is all of those members except for Pennsylvania. So going back in those 1970s, the WRDA is the Water Resources Development Act, and it, through the federal government action, it really brought about a lot of study, looking at flood control, a lot of beginning to really put a focus on supply issues. And it was through a lot of Army Corps of Engineer studies throughout the country that was bringing a lot of attention to supply issues in basins like the Potomac. And that, out of that action, there was a required one of the two really foundational agreements that exist today. The first was the Low Flow Allocation Agreement in 1978, and the purpose of that agreement is in a drought or a low flow water situation, when it gets to a certain level, there is a mandated restriction, a level of water that each jurisdiction is able to get. So it really included the jurisdictions, and the three major water utilities are part of the signatory group of that, being Fairfax Water, the Washington Aqueduct, which supplies water to the District of Columbia, and WSSC in suburban Maryland. And so it really dictated the amount of water that they were going to be able to pull in those kinds of situations. So that really began to be this set the driver for the region looking at this a little differently and talking about this cooperative solution, which is why the co-op section was brought about. You can see it here on the screen. You know, those drivers, the supplier vulnerabilities, obviously having those limited amounts of water that they're able to get. There were several studies at the time that showed the benefits of all of these areas kind of working cooperatively. Heightened federal permitting coming about at that time, and really with the low flow allocation agreement put in place, it was really penalizing growth because those numbers were set and not really meant to change. So the next sort of initiative coming out of that was the second really key agreement, and that was that really came about in 1982. We've talked a little bit about this in the past. You may remember hearing about this. The Water Supply Coordination Agreement is an agreement that really primarily is with the big three utilities in the region: Fairfax Water, WSSC, and the Aqueduct, along with the District of Columbia, and the ICPRB itself as an entity is one of the signatory members of that. And that is when the regional regional reservoirs, Jennings Randolph, we've talked about, Little Seneca, some of these, they were developed throughout right around this time. And the real basis of the Water Supply Coordination Agreement is that it was a cost-sharing agreement on the operations and maintenance of these reservoirs. And with these reservoirs becoming available, the whole intent of that was to do releases in these times of need, so that the previously mentioned low flow allocation agreement really wouldn't have to go into effect. So when there's able to be releases from these reservoirs, it really would sort of backfill and provide an additional emergency source, so that LFAA agreement never had to take place. The interesting really kind of information coming out of that is that there's been some success historically with the way this has all come about. In fact, the low flow allocation agreement in its history since 1978 has never had to be implemented. So that's a good thing, but there's also a recognition that there continues to be vulnerabilities. There continues to be the need, as things continue in the future, more demands on the system, there are going to be additional resources needed over time. So that Water Supply Coordination Agreement, it governs drought planning and operations. There's a demand and supply study that the ICPRB staff performs every 5 years. That's one of the highlights that Pam will take a look at. The latest one was published last fall. So I just wanted to share some of the results and a little bit of what goes into that study and what our participation looks like. And so I'm going to wrap up here the intro and some of the history with just, again, showing a little bit of the geography. I've mentioned who the primary water suppliers are. The regional reservoirs that exist are, you've maybe heard us talk about this at times. They're geographically located in the western mountains of Maryland into West Virginia. And so, there's some pretty long travel times for that water. And so over time, we've talked about the resources that we've been developing. And Loudon Water has really created a unique situation. We really have a big stake in all of these regional resources, and that is through our purchase capacity and our wholesale relationship with Fairfax Water. And so we have a continued stake in this cooperative system, continuing to be a success and look to the future and what the needs are. We have also, through our Potomac Water Supply Program and the use of the quarries, put ourselves in a really good spot to having some of our own control at these things with our intake and emergency supply there. And then sort of the final piece for us is we continue to work with our partnership and with Luckstone on future quarries to prepare and set up that those are potential additional solutions that may be available for the region, really to look at buying into. And so, we continue to kind of plan that those are some really great opportunities for potential opportunities for the region. So with that, I am going to pass off and it looks like Pam's able to. Pam, do you have the control now? I'll also pause for a minute and see if there are any questions really related to some of who the organization is and the history. before Pam gets into a couple of the initiatives that are going on. So I'll just pause there and see if there are any questions while she's getting set up. And Mr. Koblis.
Yep, I remembered turn off the mic or turn on the mic. Have we looked into this $10 million that we're getting yet? And is there any strings attached? And does this have anything to do with ICPRB?
Well, the first answer, it really has nothing to do with ICPRB, and it's all related to our own development of the quarry storage. But the last I heard, and anybody else can chime in if they know any different, but from a day or two ago, I don't believe we've still heard anything from the state.
Okay. I just want to make sure we don't have to give up any controls.
No. That part I think we know, but.
Okay.
Mr. Sultan?
Wasn't there an interesting part of the history that the Corps back in the 70s suggested a ring of reservoirs around the basin, and the only one that they could get approved was Jennings-Randolph?
That is correct. There were several others that have been looked at over time, and that really, I think those more traditional reservoirs, the sort of run of the river type, those have been just through permitting constraints have gotten more and more challenging to get, and so it's really brought about this kind of concept and idea of the use of like the quarries and their Fairfax water, while it's not on the Potomac, but down at their at the Griffith plant on the Occoquan, they're working with the Vulcan quarry in developing that. You've also heard us talk a little bit about some conversation looking to the future with what's called the Trevilla quarry over in Maryland. So it's brought some additional kind of interest in that, because those more traditional, the old style of reservoirs like Jennings are more challenging to get.
Right.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes, sir. You mentioned Pennsylvania is not subject to this. Just curious if you know why, since they're up at the headwaters.
Yeah, so Pennsylvania is part of the member jurisdictions for the overall ICPRB. When they created the co-op section, the reason, and I believe it was, they may have partly, I don't know if they chose not to.
I know what it is, Mark.
Okay, go ahead, Pam.
I don't believe they have any intakes in the Potomac River. So they're basically not a water supply. They're not deriving water supply from the Potomac River.
Yeah, they're in the basin, but the Potomac
Correct.
doesn't actually flow through and touch it. Yeah.
Correct. That's why.
And it looks like from the exhibit, the basin actually even extends into New York. Is that correct?
Chesapeake Bay Basin.
I'm sorry, the Chesapeake Bay Basin. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Susquehanna.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to pick up where Mark left off and focus a little bit on ICPRB and some of the services and the tools and sort of the value that they provide. And honestly, they provide it well beyond the co-op utilities. It's the rest of the region benefits from their work as well. This is just a short summary of some of the main activities that they have that benefit the water suppliers. Drought is obviously a primary focus, and much of their work is focused on drought. And then Mark mentioned the long-term planning and the 5-year outlook that they do. And so I want to talk a little bit about this water supply plan with you. Every 5 years since 1990, ICPRB has produced this report, and it was envisioned in the Water Supply Coordination Agreement that Mark mentioned, that this is so it's actually written into the agreement that this update would be performed every 5 years. I want you to take a look at the graph if you can see some of the detail. It's really interesting because we talked a bit about the Corps, and I'm going to use my cursor here and show you. This one line here, you see where it says U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 1963? This is the basis of that report that Marty Sultan was talking about, how they evaluated the need for, well, they projected the need and they evaluated siting for reservoirs all over the Potomac Basin. And this is why there was that sense of crisis that Mark was talking about, is you can see these water supply projections were going straight up. So that was the core in 1963. And then the rest of these lines, you can see different agencies have made projections since then. I think the next one, you see my cursor's close to this MWCOG projection that was made in 1975. And then you'll even see the Corps updated their projections here. I'll show you this one in 1983. And it's just fascinating to watch. You can see the slopes of these lines continue to decrease, right? And then you see the ICPRB estimates are starting to come in because they started doing this beginning in 1990. And so here in the grade area, you'll see the current projections by ICPRB in this 2020 report. And isn't it interesting how we've continued to flatten out the demand projections? And this dotted line, if you'll notice, I'll start right here. This line is, this is population not projections. This is the actual population of the Washington metro area that relies on these water supplies. So even though the population has continued to grow up at a pretty fair slope, the slope of the water demands have not equaled it. So, and these are actually the actuals. I'm going to show you the little blue dots here on this graph. These are actual water usage of the DC Metro. And you can see how it's effectively flat. And then, excuse me, when we hit recent wet periods, they've actually even decreased. So the work that the ICPRB has done is they're very science-based. And so the fact that we are predicting these increases and yet we're seeing flat or decreasing is something that they're trying to reconcile. And so some of the work that they've done in these reports is trying to refine what they would call the accuracy of the estimates. But the primary goal, the principal goal of this report every 5 years is to determine if the system's resources, all of the pieces that we've been talking about, as well as the individual resources of the individual water suppliers, if they can meet the aggregate forecast. And the forecast extends out to 30 years. So the 2020 report extends to 2050. There are some unique features of the 2020 study that make it a bit interesting. So instead of having those single line predictions that I just showed you, they've actually used a range. So they have a low, medium, and high forecast. And then based on data that's flowed in and work that others have been doing that have shown potential climate impacts on river flows, they also considered climate temperature and effects on stream flow in this 2020 report. They actually did a special study that I'm going to show you a little bit about on the next slide. But this is sort of a significant change in what they had done in the past. So you can see how just from a demand perspective down here in the little box, you can see at a low level in 2040, you're looking at 453 million gallon a day demand versus 100 million gallon a day more at the high level. So big swings when you have the whole metro area aggregated. And in this 2017 study that they did, they called it a special study. And so it kind of goes by the familiar name of, we just call it the Water Supply Alternative Study. So if you see that referenced, it didn't really have an official name, but it kind of, it occurred because in the 2015 study, it was identified that there looked to be a need for additional resources. And when they talk about resources, they're talking about storage, additional storage. And so they decided to take, the co-op instructed ICPRB to take another look, to take a hard look at some potential additions or modifications that could be made to the system and to look at climate scenarios. And so They looked at the existing resources and how they might be able to operate them differently. And then they looked at the addition of new resources, and all the new resources really focused on the quarries that we've been talking about, whether they're Loudon's, partnership with Luck Quarries, there's the Vulcan Quarry down in southern Fairfax County, and then there's the Trevilla Quarry in Montgomery County. So all of those new assets were factored into this special study in various ways. And then the results of that were embedded in the 2020 study. So the 2020 study looks at a range of options, kind of alternative system configurations, I'll call it, and that's sort of this this vertical column here shows you there's a baseline plus a little bit of operational modification, and then there's a baseline plus one quarry. You see how it's kind of additive. Different pieces were added on for the different configurations. And excuse me, and then I mentioned to you that they looked at the demands, low, medium, high demands, and then those were kind of matrixed in with different climate scenarios. So they took a bunch of different factors and created a bit of a complicated matrix to look at the range of alternatives. And so the outcome of that is that the system is still reliable 20 through 2040 under most circumstances. And then in 2050, I show you the 2050 graph because it's a little bit more dramatic, pushing the demands out 10 more years created a little bit more tension in the system. And so, it's showing you that there's the potential for failure. And what failure means is that the LFAA might have to kick in. So that's kind of basically, simplistically, that's sort of the failure of the system, is that our storage assets plus the natural assets and the operational changes aren't enough to keep us from going into from needing the LFAA. So let's see. I'm gonna jump off of that. Maybe I should take a pause and see if there are any questions, because I'm gonna kind of change topics here. Any questions on this segment of the water supply planning? And if it comes up later, that's fine. We can cover it at the end. So I'm going to keep rolling. Another really important thing that the ICPRB does for the region is they maintain this emergency spill model. And I'm going to just reference, I know you recall the latex spill back in September of 2015, and that was way upstream, in West Virginia. And the spill model was used to make a prediction of when it would reach the intakes and when it would pass the intakes of the Washington metro area. And it's important to note that because it happened in September, the river's lower and it's moving slower. And so it actually was predicted to take perhaps 28 days to get past all of those intakes. And so we've used that 28-day that criteria in some of the other studies that the region has looked at for resilience. And if you, they also used it in the Sheen event, but because the Sheen kind of broke up, it wasn't something that could be modeled. And we've put a little link in here for you if you want to go look at it later and see just in their mission for outreach, the ICPRB has prepared a little bit of a video on the model. And now I want to pivot yet once again to the other really important thing that the ICPRB is involved in, and that's the Potomac River Basin Drinking Water Source Protection Partnership. This is truly a unique organization. It is under the category of source water collaboratives, and there's a number of those across the country. But this one started early on, and this is just a snip of the 25 organizations that are involved. And what makes it so unique is it has federal and state agencies, ones with regulatory authorities, as well as all of these utilities that you see, and then other regional groups like ICPRB and Council of Governments that are all working together towards this single focus of source water protection. It's really powerful group, and we meet quarterly. And so Loudon Water has the benefit of being a member of this organization. We're able to leverage the talents and the resources of all of our neighboring utilities, as well as upstream, regulatory agencies. It's quite powerful, and frankly, because we're a Virginia entity, we don't often have opportunities to work together with, say, the Maryland agencies, and MDE has been quite a useful partner in the DWISP. So 25 members in place for 15 plus years now, all focused on source water protection. Really, really powerful. Nice annual report that one of our work groups puts together. We have 6 technical work groups, and these are the six groups that we currently have active. Loudon Water leads the agricultural issues work group. WSSC leads the contaminants of emerging concern work group. I think Fairfax Water leads 3 of the other work groups, and I believe COG leads the reaching out work group. This is a snap of our annual meeting that we held in November of 2019, and you can see a bunch of Loudon Water faces in there. I don't know that you recognize them, but there's a bunch of Loudon Water faces in that group, and it's actually really, really tremendously useful partnership. All right, trying to move it on. Some of the key activities that we do, probably wouldn't realize that they've been initiated by DWISP, but some of these spill exercises are largely led by the DWISP. We developed a monitoring protocol for spill events. The water utilities really took the leadership in that. We look at these discharge permits that come up for renewal, these upstream permits, especially for industrial facilities we're concerned about. And we have written several letters to the permitting authorities just talking about our concern for future water quality parameters that might not be something that's monitored now, but on a number of occasions, we've actually requested that MDE have them monitor for a substance, even though they can't give them a, they can't write it into their permit. But since we know it's a concern as a potential contaminant for a water supplier, then we would like to see if they could have the industry monitor for it. And then you can see some of the rest. It's been, again, quite a useful, powerful partnership. Annually, we put a report together. COVID has really kind of cramped the style of our communications group, the reaching out work group, and they haven't had time to pull together the 2020 report. But I think the 2019 report is a nice, solid report, and I would encourage you to just take a peek at it and see what's summarized there. It's pretty good. So that's pretty much what I had to present to you. So happy to cover any questions you might have.
I like that picture.
Actually, that picture is one that our communications folks helped us put together a template that we could use for annual reporting at the DWISP, and so Lauren picked that out for us.
Looks like Mr. Allen has a picture or a question.
Let's see his hand. Okay.
Here's my picture.
Oh, there's your hand.
Ever since I've been on the board, we've talked about membership in one way, shape, or form with the ICPRB. So I'm a little bit confused. I know we're members, but are we part of the commissioners or the panel that actually has voting rights? And do we want to be? Are we? I see that you're listed, Mark, as an alternate. Explain that to me.
Yeah. Yep. I think there's a couple things. So first of all, I actually was appointed as one of the Virginia commissioners. Each of the jurisdictions that I mentioned has 3 seats with three seats with an alternate for each of those. So there's actually 6 appointees, like for Virginia and for the other jurisdictions. And I was asked to be a part of that a couple of years ago, and so I'm one of the commissioners. That's fairly unusual. Not all of the utilities do, and so that's really I'm on there. Not obviously I'm representing Loudon Water and carrying our interests, but not everybody has a seat in that in terms of that. So from that standpoint, I happen to be a commissioner. Now the other thing, and I think really getting to what you're referring to, Mr. Allen, and what you heard about is within the co-op section, there's an operations committee, and that is, and those, you know, that's primarily the signatory members of the Water Supply Coordination Agreement. So that primarily is Fairfax Water, the Washington Aqueduct, and WSSC. And over the years, and you know, we've talked about this for several years. The question has come to Loudon Water, you know, whether we want to join that or not. It sort of goes back to when we're going through the process to put our intake in the Potomac River. Really, one of the major reasons and benefits we were able to be successful at that is because we brought our own storage with us. We have the quarry, and that really helped the permit process. With the conditions of our withdrawal permit, there's a requirement that we work together and coordinate with the operations committee of the ICPRB. So it gives us the opportunity to be able to be, you know, participating members. We're there with the others at the meetings. And really participate with them much like a member, but we don't have any part of the cost share. Again, other than what I mentioned, we pay a portion of that through our agreement with Fairfax Water. We pay a portion of theirs. Kind of going to the question of, is that of interest to us? I think there's some things that over time, for the benefit of the whole basin, it makes sense. We think it makes sense for several of the other intakes to be a part of that. It makes sense for that. It needs to be done right. So as going back several years, as we've been asked, do we want to join? Our first question is always, well, what is the proposal? What does that look like? The original 1982 agreement had no process to bring in someone new. It had the original signatory members. There was no process. So there's some questions that the current committee really needs to ask and look at, think about if there are changes to any cost share formulas, to a process, to, you know, whether it's us or anybody else with an intake that's not part of it, what would a process look like? We're unique, again, because we have our own storage. We have something of interest. So yes, I think there's also interest that on their part that we join, but we need to have a lot better understanding what that means. So over time, I would say that this conversation will happen. If done right, I think we see that there is some benefit, but we want to really evaluate how, you know, we think there's a first step. We think they have to really take a look for themselves at what is that invitation? What does it look like? Does it change things with the original agreement? So there's a lot of complexity to it, but I think that's what you are referring to, Terry, that you've heard that conversation over the years. And so we look at that, you know, we've continued to talk. There was a proposal to us a couple of years ago that really talked about adding us, but it was kind of attaching, you know, kind of just joining in without really opening up the full agreement. And there were some things in there that really made it so at the time, it really wasn't a possible. There were required changes to our permit that we would need to work through ourselves with the Virginia DEQ. And so I think it's something that'll continue over time, but hopefully that helps clarify some of that.
So basically, we're just waiting on them really to make the next step, and we've just been kind of in limbo, and until they, clarify roles going forward, we're not going to do anything. In other words,
well, yeah, but I would also just say, I'd emphasize that through our permit conditions, mutually, we participate with them. So we get a lot of value and benefit out of it. But yes, to become a signatory member, I think there's still kind of a long road to go there.
And Terry, if I could just add, as Mark mentioned a couple of years ago, we responded to the proposal that ICPRB or that the Operations Committee had given us, and we said, look, we want to participate. It's valuable for us. They treat us like members, except for the voting part. And look, we get the value. We're willing to even pay sort of this operations fee to continue to be a part and get the benefits. And to date, we still haven't even gotten an invoice for that. So there's no push on our side to necessarily get in there and sign the agreement because we're still reaping the benefits. So yes, it is in their court. It's a tough sell to ask them to open up that that agreement. There are some members who know that will it will have a drastic impact on them if they open it up and figure out how to invite others in. So we're kind of we're in a good place, but the ball's in their court for sure.
So this is Jim. I've attended several of their meetings. They're I think you're right. They're very protective. It's almost like there's two meetings. There's the one meeting that includes Pennsylvania, and then there's the real meeting. It's kind of an interesting organization the way it's divided. But I think that that we being engaged is very important. To stay engaged, do what we do that's best for Loudoun and for our future, and we are connected very tightly with Fairfax Water from a supply point of view. It's very, very important. But I don't see there's a hurry to make any changes or to join them, and I'll keep attending the meetings when they come up. They're virtual now, and they'll be hopefully back to in person. Mark's got a place at the table. I have to sit back by the wall.
Well, one thing, just another quick note to that. We continue to kind of keep in our mind, we have invested a lot in our system, in the quarry, and so there has to be a recognition also of that, and whatever that what that means, and we are mindful of the idea of we're not looking to give up any control of that. So again, just I think this is going to be a slow process. There's continued conversation about another look at the water supply coordination agreement. But I think even there's challenges with that, whether the utilities are going to really have interest in doing that right now.
And it's not just the investment in the quarry. We've done a tremendous investment in upgrading the reservoir. And that reservoir, with the dam, I mean, it's tens of millions of dollars in multiple years in doing that. And they look at that as a resource because it can be put into the Potomac very easily, all gravity. So, while we're in a good place, other folks may not be, and they look at those resources. So we need to think about our system first. At least that's my 2 cents.
I guess my only follow-on would be, is it better being on the operations committee and having a voice? I mean, I don't know how to phrase this. I mean, can they make us do something that we don't want to do because we're not part of the operations committee? Does being on the operations committee give us more control over our destiny than not being on it? I know those are kind of esoteric questions, but
yeah, I think the no, there's with our Potomac water supply system, with our intake, our use of the quarry, there is nothing that they can decide on or conversation about that has anything to do with that. Theirs is more the system, Fairfax Water's perspective, costs related to, the regional reservoirs like Jennings, Randolph. And again, we have a stake in that. We pay a portion of Fairfax Water's share through our wholesale agreement. But the key is you really separate our wholesale agreement and that relationship with Fairfax with our own system. Our own system, they really don't have any ability to have any control or decisions.
Hey, Mark, can I add something?
Sure.
I'll try not to get down into the rabbit hole on this, though. It's so easy with ICPRB because there's so many moving parts. They operate this model. It's called PRISM, and the acronym stands for Potomac River Reservoir Simulation Model. And maybe 10 years ago, they decided that they were going to create this simplified model that everybody could use. And it's called OASIS, and I don't remember what the acronym stands for. Recently in that special study that I mentioned, the 2017 study, all of the elements that ICPRB modeled included Beaver Dam and modifying our permit, things that Mark mentioned. And they showed us the results, right? It was like they showed us the results and said, well, what do you think? Do you like this? And we're like, we have no idea how to respond to this. We don't know what went into your model. We don't have your model. Fast forward, we said ICPRB decided they were going to update that OASIS model, which is a very simple mass balance model. And we said, you know what, we would really like to create a little OASIS model for our system because it's gaining in complexity now that we have all these pieces, right? We've got Beaver Dam Reservoir, we've got Goose Creek Reservoir, we've got our Potomac Withdrawal, and then we'll soon be adding Milestone Reservoir. And it just gives us, and the Fairfax water supply, right? So all of a sudden, we're going to have all of these options, and wouldn't it be convenient and tidy for us to have our own model to kind of, twist the knobs and turn it on and off and see how things work? And we talked to them and said, you know what, you're going to update your model. We would like to work cooperatively with you and put together a more detailed model for us for the land water system that slips right into your model so that you can show us these situations, these scenarios that you modeled, and we can understand, right? We can understand what you assumed and what you did, and we can see how it affects us. And oh, by the way, just for the board members to understand, and we can take that model and simulate all of our own scenarios and decide, how we want to potentially operate the system. So this process is going on right now. We have their consultant helping us also to pull this together. And I think later this year, we'll actually have this cooperative modeling platform. So we'll be able to go back and look at these scenarios that they ran that, we couldn't, you can't have a conversation about something that's just numbers on a page. It didn't have any meaning to us, if you appreciate my, the description. So I think that this is going to go a long way to helping us better understand some of these complexities, right? Although it's just a very simple numerical model, we will be able to turn things on and off and see how it might affect us and see how it might affect, what our permit says that we can do. And then I know we've mentioned it when we talked about the Goose Creek crossing, but just remember our current permit expires in 2027. So we've got 6 years left in our 15-year permit, and we need to start putting the studies together that we'll have to reapply for it. It's not just a simple, permits extended. This will actually require us to completely reapply for it. And it'll look different this time because when we applied last time, there's a lot of construction related things in there. That permit was helping us to, was covering all of the construction of all those facilities. So I would say this next permit version might be much more streamlined, simplified. Right now, that permit, the VWP permit for the Potomac supply is very complicated. So, we have to think about that permit too, right? And what it's going to look like going forward for us. So, summary, I think that this tool that we're building is going to be useful to us. I think it's going to help us communicate with them. I think it's going to be useful to them. And I think once it's done, it's going to help give us another stepping stone that we can better evaluate what we've been talking about here. What is the value and the benefit to joining? I think this would help us. That's it. Tried not to get into the rabbit hole too much.
Thank you. Any more questions on this topic? All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both very much for the in-depth presentation. There's just so much that goes on with ICPRB. The next item is our work plan. Alton?
Hey, good morning, Chairman Bonfils and members of the committee. Let me grab control here. So I'd like to start this item by congratulating the committee and everyone involved with the successful startup of this committee over the last several months. I think I speak for us all when I say, I'm really proud to be part of it, and I think we have a lot of exciting work ahead of us. And so I kind of just want to take a few moments here at the end to really highlight what we have proposed as the 2021 Water Resources Committee work plan. And as we've, I think, touched on previously, we felt that quarterly meetings would be a really good cadence for this committee. And so as you can see here before you, we're here at the first quarter meeting, March 3rd, which focused on an education and outreach update, as well as the items of Reservoir Park and the ICPRB overview item that we just concluded. And so really we see moving into the second quarter, an early June meeting with a water quality focus. So our annual water quality report to the customers will have been recently published by that point. And so we'd like to kind of cover an overview of that and possibly hit on some topics of emerging contaminants and things that are on the docket for EPA that may impact us in the future. Moving along to quarter 3 in early September, we want to shift gears a little bit and focus on water supply and water quantity. So that's really timely for us. We're entering into the driest time of the year for our area at that point in time. So we want to possibly cover the ICPRB publishes an annual water supply outlook. And we feel that that'd be a timely thing to review with you, as well as a broader topic of just our overall long-term plans for water supply. So hitting back on review of some of those items and potential things that we need to discuss further at that point in time. And then the fourth quarter meeting, we're proposing early December, and we want to focus most likely with this item on strategic initiatives update. So we're into our 2020 to 2024 strategic plan, and we had established 6 goal areas for the plan. So we look to come back to you at that point in time with a nice way of rounding out the year. There's activity ongoing in all of those areas, and we'd like to take that opportunity to present and highlight some of the key items and accomplishments during the calendar year on those items. And so looking ahead, we feel like this framework will be really great for the committee, that it's something that we could repeat year after year. So quarter 1, the education and outreach update, followed by these other 3 topic areas throughout the course of the year. Of course, that can be adjusted as we go. And I wanted to say, of course, Reservoir Park or other special topic areas that arise, we will certainly work those into the agenda as needed. So I want to close by thanking you all for your time this morning, and please let me know if you have any questions or comments on this draft work plan.
Mr. Kobliss?
Yes, Alton. I think we definitely need Reservoir Park updates, especially when the 100% cost estimate comes out. So sounds like we're going to be early June, and the cost estimate, I think, is coming out in late June. So I just want to make sure that we have either that or it's got to come up into the main board meeting.
Absolutely, and we'll certainly, we didn't want to nail down a date, but we'll certainly, if the committee is willing and the board members are willing, certainly adjust the dates as needed to weave that in.
Yeah.
But thank you. That's a great reminder.
Yeah, I'll work with you at that. That's a key timing issue for that June meeting.
Yeah, and I
Absolutely.
think just one quick note to follow that, just like we did in the fall, we can always set up a special meeting outside of this or just adjust this. So definitely that's been on our radar.
But even having said that, it's reasonable to have a bullet point in each of these, an update. I mean, each of these quarterly meetings, I want to get a Beaver Dam update. So I know you'll do that, and it sounds like we're all in agreement of that. So
yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. We should do that. We should have an update on that. I'd also like to see, as we're talking about the ICPRB, we should also have understand what EPA and the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, what their new requirements are coming up, what they're looking at, what some of the committees are discussing, and how they might impact us in our long-term planning. I think at some point in here, we should, during this work plan for this year, we should have a discussion about that.
Point well taken. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's that can have a pretty substantial impact on us. Is there any reason to review to understand our relationship with Blue Plains and the connector? I know they raised our fees in the last year, so.
That's actually another great point. That's something that we can look to bring into the schedule for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Alton, I think we had even talked about that. We Mark didn't pop in here, but we're planning to do a similar kind of background presentation to you on the COG committees. And the Blue Plains committee is under that umbrella of COG committee. So we were thinking that might be another nice little chunk of background information. And you're right, it really plays into things. Great.
So to summarize, we're going to add those items to our meetings this year, plus a quarterly update on the Reservoir Park. That makes sense.
Absolutely. We'll take care of that and get a final draft, final revision out.
Yeah. I'd like to have that as part of my report to the full board on next week. So let's talk about that.
Certainly.
All right. And any other questions on the work plan?
I had just one comment for you to consider, Chairman Bonfils, and that is, our thinking behind this was that we would just give you the themes that we were thinking about, basically, time of year, if you will, but that you might very well have things that you're interested in hearing about. And so, as we plan these, since they're spaced so far apart, we were thinking that it would give you a good opportunity for the committee to think about other things, like you've mentioned, that might be of interest to you, and we can see where they might work their way into the big thematic topics.
All right.
Very flexible. We are a very flexible staff.
Great. That's great. We're happy about that. And so I think the last thing on I appreciate you going through the work. Unless there's any other comments on the work plan, we'll work on that. And then as the meetings come up, if there are topics that members of the committee would like to have discussed, let's in a timely manner, a week or two before, we can talk with Pam and Mark and get it added to the discussion. Next meeting, let's see when that report comes back in for the full cost estimates, so we can review those. That may be later in June, and that's fine. So let's have the timing on that meeting. Having these meetings follow the many of us are on the committee, the audit committee. Is fine with me, depending on how those are set up. So we can be flexible on those. Anybody have any input on the meeting timing? Nope. All right. So I think that brings our agenda to a close. Is that correct?
Yes, we just need a motion to adjourn and a
I
vote.
motion to adjourn, Mr. Allen.
Second?
I'll second. It's Brent.
All right.
Roll call.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bonfils, your vote?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Adjourned at 10:18. Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you.
All the
Thank
time.
you.